In this, the fourth part of our UX design series, we're going to have a look at sight, in particular focusing on what it is we don't see when we're looking at an interface. Possibly a somewhat curious notion, but if we're drawn our attention here not to what we tend to see, but what we don't see, it highlights the fact that when we look at something and we see something, that's important, that's relevant. But what is potentially more relevant are the things around that we are not seeing, that we are not having conscious awareness of. Obviously, in terms of developing an application or an app that the user is looking at, we want to make sure that if we're providing or presenting information to the user, then it is something that they will see. And simply sticking it up on the screen does not necessarily guarantee that, as we'll see. So I've got a couple of examples here. When we think of sight, what we mean by this is not only the visual recognition through our eyes and the identification of objects within the mind, we mean that what it is the user becomes consciously aware of, what it is that they perceive and recognize and identify and say, oh, I have saw that. We're actually quite fickle in terms of how we do this, and there's a number of famous experiments where sort of psychologists have shown just how sort of specific we are in terms of our sight. And the screenshot of the one here is of a challenge or a task where people were asked to count the number of times that a couple of basketballs were thrown between people. So they're focusing on sort of counting 1, 2, 3 as the different passes are made. Mid-video, you have somebody dressed up in a gorilla suit come onto the center of the screen, look towards the camera, wave, and then walk off. And for a significant number of people who actually took this challenge, and they were asked at the end, okay, well, how many passes were made? They could give you an accurate value. And if you were then to ask them, did you see the gorilla? They would go, what gorilla? Something they had no conscious awareness of. So in a large part, what it is that we see, and by see I mean have conscious awareness of, is based on what it is we expect to see. Now, how might this tie in with something like interface design? You see an example over on the right, where on page 1 you have a back and a next button, and it's arranged in a certain way with next on the right. Page 2, same arrangement, the user clicks on the right for the next page. Page 3, the user clicks on the right to go to the next page. Page 4, the buttons have swapped around in terms of their ordering. It's very likely that this will be utterly unnoticed by the user. And there's a good chance when they will sort of at page 4, they will almost see next within the back button. That is what they will expect to see there. They'll click on it, that's what they'll expect to have happened. So for what it is we see, what it is we are consciously aware of, a number of factors influence this. So our past experience, what it is we have experienced, our present context, what it is we are doing at this point in time, and also our future goals, what it is we are hoping to achieve or to do. All of those things have a bearing upon what it is we focus on, we are consciously aware of as part of our sight. So our experience, context, our goals, they filter what it is we perceive. Things that generally are not relevant or related either to our past, what it is we're doing, or our goals, these are things then that can be missed or sort of discarded by the brain as not being relevant. How does this then tie in with the apps that we design? In a crude form, it's simply saying that if you want to present some information to the user and you just simply stick it up on the screen and you think, okay, well, it's there, the user should see it, they may not see it. It would need to be something that either ties in with their experience, the goals that they have, or something that they notionally want to achieve because then they have some relevance for that information. And even then, there's a few other things as we'll see in terms of how and where it is presented on the screen. So simply sticking up something on the screen does not at all guarantee that the user is or is even likely to be aware of it. And indeed, you can see an example here for the picture where, spot the difference. That we actually find it difficult to sort of notice subtle changes in terms of presentation. So we're going to look at a number of different techniques now that we can use to make sure that, or to maximize the probability that the user is indeed aware of the information that we present to them. Few common ways. First one, avoid anything that's sort of ambiguous within the design. There are a number of standards or conventions for user interface design, sort of platform specific and ones in general. You want to adhere to those. So in terms of how you sort of position your cancel button next to your OK button, the shapes of these things, the colors of these things, the types of icons that you use within it, you want to use established norms. If they're established, it means these are ties into the user's prior experiences. There's things that the user has used, knows what they do, and then is in safer ground in terms of interpreting and recognizing, yes, okay, I've been here before, this is the type of flow. If you do have something that's novel, and a lot of applications are, in that sense it's actually quite important to go out to your user group and to make sure that showing them a particular screen, asking them to do a particular thing, that there's a good degree of commonality in terms of how they approach that through whatever interface you've designed. Be consistent. So if you have, let's say it's you're designing an app, and within the app there's various locations you need to ask the user to enter in some textual string. If that's the case, then each time you're using or asking the user to enter in the textual string, ideally you should be as consistent as you possibly can be. Same types of fonts, same types of layouts, same types of colors, so that the user associates and recognizes their previous experiences. Oh, okay, I've done this in the past, I'm now being asked to do something similar. They know where to look, they know what the things do. Again, it helps them by way of understanding what it is that is being presented to them. This is probably the most important thing, and this is a general design principle that really helps us in terms of being able to perceive information, but it underpins the essence as to why we should develop things or how we should develop things in the first place. It's all about understanding the user's goals. Why is the user using your app? Why is the user at this particular screen? What are they trying to accomplish? So we're always trying to think with this in mind, that the user is using this to some end, for some purpose. And we want to keep that goal in mind and to make sure in terms of how we sequence steps, how we present information, it is mindful of that goal and ties in with the particular goal. So we don't want to present things which are not relevant or to do things in a different way. I'm going to have a look at colours now. Our colour vision is actually limited. Yes, we can see a wide spectrum of colours, but there are a number of characteristics about how we tend to perceive those. Sort of looking at this one, that's actually one of my sort of favourite images. For our eyesight, to a good degree, we try to, when we're looking at things, to detect and identify objects. So things like edge detection, we're trying to define boundaries between objects. That's quite a strong drive within our perception. What is less of a strong drive is the absolute level of brightness that something has, or the colour to a degree that it has as well. So in terms of, for example, the image shown on this screen, you have two squares A and B. And square A seems to be sort of maybe a dark grey colour, square B more of a light grey colour. The reality is that the colour within box A and within box B is identical, utterly identical. And if you were to sort of cut it out or print it, cut it out and move the two things together, you would notice A and B as squares have exactly the same colour, even though I can visually look at it and go, no, they actually are distinct, they're different. They're not. Other aspects, this is about how colours go together. For things like chromostereotypes, this actually, you can have pseudo 3D effects depending on how colours are combined. Certain colour combinations will make text appear to stand out or to be recessed, to sort of sink in. So we want to avoid colour combinations that actually are difficult to read. I suppose this ties in with the previous talk on looking at fonts. So given this context then, that our visual system, there's certain things we notice, certain things we don't notice. What we do notice is tied into our prior, our current, and our goals in the future. How do we make sure that the information that we provide to the user and introduce on the screen gets to be noticed? There's a few simple principles that we can use. Key to a lot of these is the idea or the notion that when you are looking at something, you have a focal point. This is what the eye is focusing on. That's normally seen in quite good detail, quite good clarity. The things surrounding that and further go out, these are all peripheral vision, and those are not seen with great clarity. And if we introduce stationary, just display some text within that peripheral vision, is something that may not be picked up by the user. It's more difficult to pick that up because they're not looking at it directly. We do know the things that wiggling text or displaying in a certain bright, high contrast colour, these will help the brain identify things that are in the peripheral. So, again, an example here. It's maybe it's a returning customer log-on screen once for a login ID and a password. Then there's a login button down at the bottom right-hand side. So if the user were filling this in and sort of click on the login screen or the login button, that's going to be their focal point. They will be focusing on that to make sure by way of the press or the click that they've hit that particular button. Now, if we were displaying an error message, for example, the one here, login ID not found, if we display this away from the focal point, so away from the login button, it means it's going to be in the peripheral of the user's vision, and that's a risk then that it may not be noticed. So displaying it outside of where you expect the user to be looking at, that's potentially a recipe to having things get on to be unnoticed. What we should do then, our ways around this, is that wherever we expect the user to be looking, this is where we introduce new text. So if there's a login, this screen here, a sign-in button, and we want to signify that, oh no, there's a problem with sign-in, then a message signifying that should be displayed around that particular bit. So it's easier for the user to pick up, oh, hold on, there's some new information that has displayed. Other things we can do, use symbols. We said in the previous talk that reading isn't natural. We have to scan the word groupings, chunk them together, or letter groupings, chunk them into words, understand those words. Visual recognition of icons, in contrast, actually is very fast. It's very easy for us to visually look at an icon, to recognize it as being something, and then to understand, okay, what does that icon mean? So you can use a number of sort of standard warning or error icons, and again, tying those in helps the user immediately pick up, oh, there's something here, and this is the type of information that it is. Third thing we can do is to have a high contrast in terms of the presented colour. And very often within applications, we're used to the standard convention that things like red, that's an error message. There's something important. If it's displayed in red, generally isn't good. You better read this. So using these three things here of asking where is the user likely to be looking, let's put the new information there. Using a recognizable icon and using a high contrast colour, they will all help make sure that whatever it is we're adding gets to be seen. This screen has been entitled Getting Noticed, Heavy Artillery, Use Sparingly. Sometimes we want to be 100% certain that the user, or as close as we can be, that the user has identified, recognized, taken account of the information. So there's some things which are, very important, and we want to flag them up to the user as being particularly important. I say use sparingly here because it really should be something that is really important. And if you're doing this for all of the information you're providing to the user, even for things that are not that important, it's just going to annoy the user. It's going to be just a bad user experience. 3 things we can do here. There are others. Use a modal dialogue. So a modal dialogue, one that will be displayed, it basically blocks out any other dialogues or elements within the application until that dialogue has been dealt with. So they are ones that kind of interrupt what the user was doing, sticks it in their face and says, you're not doing anything else until you've dealt with me. Display a distinct alert sound now. It depends if you have volume up, volume down, things like that. But if you do a beep, or you put in a sound in, it's an application which isn't sort of sonically rich, that's an indication to the user that, hold on, something's happened here. I've been alerted to something. I should try to work out, well, what has changed if it's not apparent. Briefly, flash or wiggle. So again, things that if it's not on a periphery, if we are wiggling or moving it about, it produces a reflective eye movement. It's an automatic eye movement. Our eyes are automatically dragged to where there is movement, and we notice that then. A lot of advertisers use this within the ads on the screen, and frankly it's annoying, and they know it's annoying, where there will be flashes or change or wiggles simply to try to get eyes pulled over towards that. Dubious quality if they're attracting you for the wrong reasons. Equally, you don't want to keep doing this because you will disrupt whatever the user was looking at, and it would need to be really important information that the user is going to say, oh, I needed to know about that. Takeaways on this one then. What we actually see, meaning what we consciously perceive, it's based on our experiences to date. It's based on what it is we're currently doing, what we expect to see. It's based on the goals that we have. These things provide us or enable us to classify things as relevant, not relevant. Things that are not relevant, generally our visual system, they're there, it's processed them and it's thought, nah, I don't need to be particularly aware of these things, I can discard them. It's an issue, or can be an issue, because when we're looking at an interface, there is actually only a small region that we are particularly focused on that we see in great clarity. The rest is in the periphery. So adding information in, we need to ask or to understand either where the user is looking at, or how are we going to make sure if we add this into the periphery that they will appropriately, or depending on the information, notice it or pick it up. Most important thing we can do, and this helps from a whole wide range of different reasons as a designer, is to think of it from the user's perspective. Why is the user using this? What is the user likely to be wanting to accomplish? And to always keep those users' goals in mind, and to design it or lay out our flows with those goals really at the heart of it.